Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Uh, I would normally be at the Zendo, but I was possibly exposed to COVID about a little over a week ago. And so just to be entirely safe, I'm staying at home today. I've tested negative several times and I don't think I have it, but never, it's not I'd rather be safe than sorry in this case. In any event, good morning, and I'm going to start with a reading that I think you might find kind of interesting. So this is an interaction between two of the ancestors in our particular lineage, Jayata and Vasubandhu. So Vasubandhu is a very famous figure in Buddhism, Indian and also Tibetan Buddhism. And I recommend that at some point you Google Vasubandhu and see if you can understand it. There's some very, very intense, kind of technically intellectual, but also really deep treatises that he wrote on enlightenment and different aspects of Buddhism of the time. So in this case, though, what I'd like to focus on is Jayata in his interaction with Vasubandhu when they met for the first time. Jayata, there's not as much known about, but he obviously was quite a preeminent master in his own right. So this piece is called Zen Patriarch Jayata Embarrasses Buddhist Monks and Converts Their Leader. The 20th Indian Patriarch Jayata was from a kingdom in northern India. His wisdom and knowledge were deep, his instruction and guidance beyond reckoning. In later years, he went to the city of Rajagarhya, where he expounded the sudden teaching. There were many scholars there who only valued debating. Their leader was Vasubandhu, which means everywhere active. So the name Vasubandhu means everywhere active. He always took one meal a day, never lay down to sleep, and prostrated to the Buddha 6 times daily. The master Jayata wished to liberate him, so he first asked Vasubandhu's followers, "This everywhere action is disciplined and can practice pure living, but is he able to attain the Buddha way?" His followers answered, "Our teacher makes great efforts, so why should he be unable to?" "Your teacher is far from the way," said the master. "Even supposing that he kept on practicing for as many kalpas as there have been atoms in the universe so far, all is on a false foundation." "What meritorious practices has the master accumulated that he jeers at our teacher?" responded his followers. "I do not seek the way, but neither do I go against it," said the master. "I do not worship Buddha, but neither am I haughty nor superficial. I do not sit long in meditation, but neither am I negligent. I may not eat just one meal a day, yet I do not overindulge. Even though I do not know what enough is, I am not greedy. In my heart, there are no expectations. This is called the way." When Vasubandhu heard this, he gave rise to wisdom without outflows and joyfully praised the master. "Do you understand my words or not?" the master asked the assembly once more. "The reason for my acting like this was on account of his heart's urge to search the way. He is like a string on a musical instrument, too tense, and it breaks. Therefore, I didn't praise him by letting him settle in an easy place, but had him enter the wisdom of all the Buddhas. I just curbed you in front of your followers," continued the master to everywhere action, or Vasubandhu. "Did you attain to the state of not fretting about that in your heart of hearts?" "My only wish is, out of your great compassion, to pass on instruction in this wonderful Dharma," said Vasubandhu. You have cultivated many virtues for a long time, said the master, and you will continue my teaching. Listen to my gatha. A gatha is an awakening poem. So this is his poem. To be in union with the unborn through one word is to be united with the nature of the Dharma realm. If one can be liberated like this, penetration of relative and absolute is complete. So, pretty long story, but I thought it was quite an interesting interaction. This is a longer piece of what appears in a different translation in shorter form in the koan collection that we use called Transmitting the Light. Transmitting the Light was put together from other sources by Master Kazon, who was the third generation master past Dogen, who studied in Japan. And he attempted to link together all different masters from the past into a cogent lineage. It's said primarily to promote the Dogen Zen school as the kind of ultimate or best school in Japan at that time. There was evidently quite a bit of conflict between different schools as to who would become favored by the ruling class. And in Japan at that time, the ruling class determined who was able to have a school or who was able to have monasteries. You couldn't just start one without the support of the local lord or daimyos, they were called in Japan. So to go back to this story of Jayata, this takes place in ancient India, where Buddhism is said to have started, northern India at least. And it starts out by saying that Jayata is an adherent or a practitioner of the sudden method or the sudden school. And this could be something that was added in by somebody in China later, because at that time there was, in China that is, much later than this would have taken place, maybe as much as 800 years or so later, there was quite a bit of, you might say conflict, but certainly debate between the northern and southern schools of Zen. One of the schools was the one that believed primarily in sudden awakening, and the other was the school that would become more like the Soto school in Japan, which is where the Soto school is derived from, which was the gradual school. So right away, you know that this guy is someone who is coming from a perspective of sudden awakening upon hearing the Dharma, in this case, provided one is at a place where one is ready to receive it. This is the important thing in terms of interactions between teachers and students throughout the history of Zen, is that awakening happens when the person is ready, when the student or the practitioner is ready to hear it. And there's many ways that we can become awakened to what reality is. Any of the sense gates, as they're called, and there are 6, the normal senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, all those, and then thinking, which is considered the 6th sense in Buddhist theory. So this would be the awakening that Vasubandhu had, would be considered the awakening through hearing. In this case, hearing the Dharma as preached by Jayata, who eventually became, shortly after that, became his teacher, and also Vasubandhu became his successor. So there's a few things that I find really interesting about this interaction. I find the name Vasubandhu, everywhere active, as being kind of amusing in a sense. Some of us may feel like everywhere active in our lives. And with Zen maybe being the antidote to being everywhere active, And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And Jayata kind of plays on this, he's basically panning or criticizing Vasubandhu, and who's considered to be the teacher of this sect or this group at the time. But it's also said that his followers are into debate quite a bit. In other words, there's a lot of intellectual debate going on about different points of the Dharma. And when Jayata admonishes these practitioners, he says, it doesn't, your teacher's a long ways from understanding what I'm talking about. Even if he kept on practicing for as many kalpas as there have been atoms in the universe so far, it's not going to work. So one thing that always fascinates me, and this story points it out, is that interesting time when our mind turns or flips and we see something clearly that we didn't see before. I call that an awakening. And awakenings, in my experience, can happen in many different forms through many different methods, or no method at all, no perceivable method. But we're just ready for it. And when we're ready and we're keeping an open mind, and there's a certain quality, you could say, of doubt in the background, if not in the foreground, or lack of clarity is the kind of doubt that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about doubting, whether, who I should vote for president or something like that. This is a kind of lack of clarity that we sense. We're not seeing clearly, we're not experiencing clearly. And then all of a sudden, something triggers an awakening. And we can't unsee what we've seen once we've seen it. You can't stuff the genie back into the bottle, right? The genie, once it's out, is beyond our ability to stuff back in, nor would probably we want to. Why would we want to go back to delusion? Well, in the Matrix series, it talks a little bit about that. If life is full of a tremendous amount of suffering for us, and we just want to free ourselves, and we don't understand what the true way to free ourselves from that suffering is, then we may want to stuff it. And I think stuffing the feelings, stuffing the pain, stuffing the suffering in is a method that everybody uses unconsciously, if not consciously. But it doesn't stay in. I mean, sooner or later it comes out in situations that are intense or traumatic or difficult. Those situations often bring people, for instance, to practice, to initial practice. For me, it was the kind of suffering like that brought me when I was 17 years old to this practice. It wasn't exactly this practice, but it was meditation practice. For other people, it's a financial reversal, a health reversal, a relationship issue. Anything in life that causes suffering that we can't get a handle on, we can't work with it effectively, that makes us kind of ripe, if we have the karma of Zen or Buddhist practice, to make that transition. So Vasubandhu is engaged in what he considers Buddhist practice, and it is, the debate and the intellectual side and the heavy austerity. It sounds like that he's engaging in. But freedom of mind is not dependent upon any particular methodology. Now, that doesn't mean that some things aren't proven to be pretty effective in setting up a situation for the mind to shift, for awakening to occur. I believe that Zazen or Zen meditation is one of those means. But if we attach to that or we overdo it to the exclusion of other things going on in our mind that need to be addressed, then we just go away from that freedom. We don't go towards it. And this is where Jayata makes this statement, several sentences long. I'll read it again because I think it's really beautiful. He says, I do not seek the way, but neither do I go against it. I do not worship Buddha, but neither am I haughty nor superficial. I do not sit long in meditation, but neither am I negligent. I may not eat just once a day, which, by the way, is what the Vinaya says you should do in certain instances. Yet I do not overindulge. Even though I do not know what enough is, I am not greedy. In my heart, there are no expectations. This is called the way. So what he's expressing here, this is a person who's free of attachment to any particular methodology, to Buddhism itself, to the Buddha. The Buddha was a revered and worshipped figure during that time. That's why he says, and still is in certain countries, he says, I don't worship the Buddha. He's not worshiping something outside of himself. So this is the statement of a really awakened person who, through his words and through this initial contact with Vasubandhu, awakens him to a certain reality, to what freedom of mind truly is. And then something also happens, which I think is really wonderful, and it's kind of atypical in Buddhist literature of this time, because it talks kind of more about an emotional component. Jayata says, I just curbed you in front of all of your followers. Did you attain to the state of not fretting about that in your heart of hearts? So, Vasubandhu has claimed that he understands what Jayata is saying, and Jayata is testing him a little. He's saying, did self-conscious ego arise when you were being dissed? Dissed by me, this guy that just wandered in from the north? In your heart of hearts, he says. In other words, don't just say it off the top. Really examine, is there something you're still attached to there? Are you still attached to being the teacher? Are you still attached to being the one who's correct? Are you still attached to the one that everyone looks up to, that thinks is superior in has a superior understanding in some way? Do you attach to that, or are you able to be one with what I'm saying without the ego self interfering? And that's not an easy thing, as we all know. Imagine you're in that situation. Excuse me. Imagine that you've spent years with all these followers, and you're the head guy or girl or woman, I'm sorry, the head man, the head woman. And all of a sudden, some person comes in who is obviously a powerful personality and has a certain amount of street cred, right? They have this rep as being this awakened person. I'm sure Jayata just didn't wander in without anyone knowing who or what he was. Can you then release your hold on your position to be ready to receive this awakened person's message, which could then free you from the grip of your own self, essentially, your own intrusive parts of self that keep you or me tied to the wheel of suffering, the wheel of causative suffering, causative suffering. So this kind of opens up a lot of cans of worms here. There's a lot of different aspects to it. So maybe I'll just open it up now to anything anyone would like to say or any questions about